In Question Factory, we're already doing a pretty good job of making some of this data random so that all of the questions aren't identical. To help with this, Foundry comes with built-in support for Faker, a library that's great at creating all kinds of interesting fake data. If you look at the top of the Foundry docs, you'll see a section called Faker and a link to the Faker documentation. This tells you everything that Faker can do, which is a lot. Let's use it to make our fixtures even better. For example, for the random -1 to -100 days, we can make it more readable by replacing the new date time with self::faker. That's how you get an instance of the Faker object, then arrow date time between to go from -100 days to -1 day. And because this is more flexible, we can even change it from -100 days to -1 minute. Even the random true-false condition at the beginning can be generated by Faker. What we really want is to create published questions about 70% of the time. We can do that with self::faker arrow boolean 70. This is cool, but the real problem is that the name and question are always the same. This is definitely not realistic. Let's fix that. Set name to self::faker arrow real text to get several words of real-looking text. For slug, there's a feature for that. Self::faker arrow slug. Finally, for the question text, it can be made more interesting by using self::faker arrow paragraphs. Faker lets you use paragraphs like a property, or you can call a function and pass arguments, which are the number of paragraphs and whether you want them returned as text, which we do, or as an array. For the number of paragraphs, we can use Faker again. Self::faker arrow number between 1, 4, and then true to return this as a string. Let's take this for a test drive. Find your terminal and reload the fixtures with Symfony console doctrine fixtures load. Go check the homepage and yeah! Oh, but the real text for the name is way too long. What I meant to do is pass real text 50. Let's reload the fixtures again. And there we go. We now have many question objects, and they represent a rich set of unique data. This is why I love Foundry. If you click into one of the questions, you can see that the slug is unique, but was generated in a way that is completely unrelated to the question's name. That's maybe okay, but it's not realistic. Could we fix that? Of course. Foundry comes with a nice hook system where we can do actions before or after each item is saved. Inside Question Factory, the initialize method is where you can add these hooks. Remove the slug key from getDefaults and, instead, down here, uncomment this before instantiate and change it to after instantiate. So, after instantiate, we want to run this function. Inside, to generate a random slug based off of the name, we can say, if not $get_slug, in case we set it manually for some reason, then use Symfony slugger equals new ASCII slugger, and set it with $set slug, slugger slug, $get name. Nice! Let's try it. Move over, reload the fixtures again, and go back to the homepage. Let's see if I click the first one. Yes, it works. It has some uppercase letters, which we could normalize to lowercase. But I'm not going to worry about that because in a few minutes, we'll add an even better way of generating slugs across our entire system. Let's try one last thing with Foundry. To have nice testing data, we need a mixture of published and unpublished questions. We're currently accomplishing that by randomly setting some asked_at properties to null. Instead, let's create two different sets of fixtures, exactly 20 that are published and exactly 5 that are unpublished. To do this, first remove the randomness from asked at in get defaults. Let's always set this. If we stopped here, we would, of course, have 20 questions that are all published. But now, add a new public function to the factory, public function unpublished that returns self. I totally just made up that name. Inside, return this arrow add state and pass it an array with asked at set to null. Here's the deal. When you call add state, it changes the default data inside this instance of the factory. Oh, and the return statement here just helps to return self, which allows method chaining. To use this, go back to app fixtures. Start with question factory : new to get a second instance of question factory, then arrow unpublished to change the default asked at data. You can see why I called the method unpublished. It makes this super clear. Finish with arrow create many 5. I love this. It reads like a story. Create a new factory, make everything unpublished, and create 5. Let's even make sure it works. At your terminal, reload the fixtures. Then refresh the homepage. All good. If we dug into the database, we'd find 20 published questions and 5 unpublished. Foundry can do more, especially with doctrine relations and testing. And we'll talk about doctrine relations in the next tutorial. But first, the slug property is being set automatically in our fixtures. That's cool, but I'd really love for the slug to automatically be set to a URL-safe version of the name, no matter where we create a question object. Basically, we should never need to worry about setting the slug manually. So next, let's install a bundle that will give our entity sluggable and time-stampable superpowers.